So we've got a nice nightscape. The nice thing about mistings, you can use them day or night. A lot of people are like, yeah, the summer's not bad, but it's when the nights don't cool off that just kill me. And I'm like, well, you know what? 90 degrees at night is still a lot better than 112 during the day. Mm-hmm. But when you can turn on that mister, you could drop the ambient temperature immediately.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can get it down 30 degrees in some cases. So that's a fairly rare scenario. But I took some photos yesterday. I was tracking how my system was doing. I got 24 degrees difference between, say, 4 and 5 o'clock in the evening yesterday. So depending on how it's set up, I mean, it makes a massive difference.
And setting it up has to be done right. A misting system is not something you buy at a box store that screws onto your hose bib and uses the pressure that whatever your house pressure is at, 65 psi, right. 30, 50 psi, whatever the case. And it might spray water, but you got big drops and you got ponding, and it's very short period of time. You end up with a lot of hard mineral deposits building up. And mm-hmm. I don't know that I've ever seen one of those misting systems in a home where somebody they might put it in this year. They don't turn it on next year, or don't put it back up next year.
It's a great starter set for the real thing. Yeah. Yeah. Once people get one of those, usually they go, oh, you know what? This is not what I saw at the restaurant. So, all right, let's just go get the real thing now. So, yeah, it's a totally different ball game. You got 1,000 psi coming out of our setups compared to, like you said, hose bib anywhere from, say, 30 to 65 psi. So it's very highly atomized water and soaks into the atmosphere very quickly. So it makes a big difference.
And why is that so important in a misting system to get it pressurized to 1,000 psi? It's over 10 times what's coming out of your hose.
Yeah. So the reason is it evaporates into the air a lot more quickly. And instead of, if you're sitting underneath one that, say, it's only 40 psi with those big droplets you were talking about, you're just going to get wet. It's not really soaking up into the atmosphere. It's just like a little tiny, it's like getting sprayed by a water bottle, essentially. So it's a totally different concept. It doesn't cool the air as much. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a great starter set.
So how do we get it up to 1,000 psi?
Yeah, so you've got your pump that's going to take it up to 1,000 psi. So there's different types of pumps, and there's way different, huge ranges when it comes to the size of pumps. We've got one going on right now that's a 10-gallon a minute pump for a massive commercial job. The average residential could be anywhere from a half gallon to a gallon and a half, but that's what gets it up to 1,000 psi. And then there's anti-drip nozzle assemblies, drain nozzle assemblies. So it doesn't just continue to drip on you after you turn it off. So it's a lot more advanced than the old school hose bib setup.
And when you're talking gallons per minute, mm-hmm. What did you say the residential one?
Well, it could be anywhere from, say, a quarter gallon up to, we've got some that can do, 3 gallons a minute or more. It really just depends. The average house that's got, say, a 20-foot opening on their back patio, you're looking at a flow rate of about a quarter gallon per minute on average. So it's really not that much water. You can go out there for a while and your pool's going to evaporate a lot more water than your mist system's going to use.
A lot more efficient than a lawn or a pool.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And if you got turf, you got minimal water usage that you're going through.
Now, what kind of power does it take to get it pressurized to 1,000 psi?
Good question. It depends on the type of pump, and it depends on the size of the pump. So, for example, we've got 115 volt options that will draw 8 to 9 amps for the smaller pumps. Then we can go all the way up to 480 if we need to for a big commercial job. There's different types of pumps, like I said. So a belt-driven pump's going to run at a lower RPM, draws less power than a standard direct drive pump. Then there's variable frequency drive pumps. They require a bit more juice, so like 220. But then in those cases, you can run separate zones at different times or all together. So lots of different ways of doing it. But the power source is very important because a lot of times what happens is, say you got a 1 gallon a minute pump and it's going to draw 12 amps. Well, if somebody says, oh, well, I can jump a circuit out there from my bathroom or the living room, well, it's going to start tripping that circuit. So it's very important to go through the details with the customer so that they understand the amp draw, so that they know if you want to set this up right to where it's not going to have issues and you can graduate to any size pump you want, essentially, let's just do it a certain way. And that's where going over the details with everybody helps.
And you mentioned variable speed pump. Mm-hmm. Does that mean you could have, misting pressure high, low, and medium, or is
No, it
what's
means
the
you can
variable
do
speed?
numerous zones. So, say you've got 5 different zones and you want to run it all off of one pump.
And the zones would be patio, pool.
Ramada, putting green, stuff like that. Yep. So you can run a small portion of that pump's capacity, or you can run it all together. And depending on how you set it up, you can run independent zones. So there's usually a minimum flow rate that we've got to factor in. So a lot of multi-zone systems, the bigger zone needs to be the primary zone. But say you get a variable frequency drive pump and you've got 2 zones, you can run either or you can run both. So again, it's a lot of it has to do with the minimum flow rate, but VFDs give you a lot more options.
And on those options, how am I turning those zones off? Do I have to go, turn a water lever or on-off switch at each zone?
Well, there's a lot of different options. You could, in theory, if it's an inline valve where you've got your main patio that then it goes through and feeds a Ramada after that, you could do just a ball valve. You could do individual runs to where you have each zone independently, like I said. Or, if we can get ahead of it, say someone's building a house and they've got home automation, something like that, we can work with their builder and say, this is what we need to tie into your home automation. So all they got to do is push a button and that zone kicks on. So there's a lot of different ways to set it up with the electrical. I personally like doing it from my phone because I've got different zones and my phone's always on me. So as I'm walking outside, I can hit my chicken coop pump, or I can hit the main patio, whether it's perimeter mist or my mist fan coming down from the ceiling.
And when we're atomizing the water, and at that high pressure, the old misting system just tied into your hose, you get a lot of mineral deposits really quick.
Yeah.
Does that come into a factor when it's atomized that, or are we?
Absolutely.
It's still a factor.
Yeah, so water quality is very important. We always tie into softened water when we get the chance. On some jobs, we even have access to reverse osmosis water, which is some of the cleanest. We've got some jobs out there that are 5, 6, 7 years old with black mist fans that look brand new because of the water.
Now, that reverse osmosis, that's typically not a residential application.
No.
Your RO at your sink is 2-3 gallons a day.
Exactly.
That's not going to work on a.
That's why it's more commercial. So like for a restaurant that's willing to invest the money to have the best water possible, their patio is going to look brand new. A lot of people have softeners because the calcium, the hard water that we have here in the state, that calcium will clog up the nozzles over time. So when we run it through a soft water system with our additional filtration system on the pump, that's best case scenario. Otherwise, it's just the calcium is brutal on these systems, and even though there's multiple filters in line, it's 1,000 psi going through a tiny little pinhole. So if anything makes it past that, or calcium starts to solidify, that's going to be a problem. So we always give people extra nozzles just in case.
Yeah, the other advantage, by the way, is not just our system, but people's furniture, and there's more and more glass on patios now, sliding doors, windows, large openings. So we worry about that. And if anybody's ever cleaned off rattan furniture, it's not a lot of fun when you're doing it with calcium. So we do try to protect our clients' material as well.
It's funny you mentioned that. One of the memories I have growing up, a friend of Rosie's installed a misting fan for him. So it's a fan that blows both ways, and around it there's a mister. Mm-hmm. And he put it right in the middle of the patio.
Right.
And where that is, there's 2 big glass windows and then the sliding glass window over there. Mom turned that off like after a very short period of time because she was it just clogged up the windows. It just created a huge, you couldn't see out the back door because of all the mineral deposits that ended up landing on the glass, like you were saying.
Yeah. Well, it's important to have a professional come out, because we can advise people. People go to restaurants and they see these misted fans and they look great, they perform well, but they're larger areas. So you get a small patio and people say, well, let's put one on that patio. Doesn't always work. Now you're plugging nozzles and you're spending a lot of money for that. So it does pay to have a professional come out and walk people through that and give them the ins and outs and let them understand what they're up against and how it can perform.
And something I hadn't seen until I was at y'all's office this week was adjustable nozzles. The misting line, mm-hmm. It's not plastic. I mean, these are stainless steel powder coated lines that y'all are running these mist lines through. And I'd always seen just a static, thread where you put the nozzle in and it goes that direction. But you guys have adjustable ones.
Yeah, so we've got swivel adapters, and then you can do extensions too. So the swivels you can turn in different directions. When Dad started the company 18 years ago, excuse me, before we had these product lines, we used to go back and adjust the mist lines directionally when the weather would change. So later in the season, when it's more monsoon season, people would say, "Oh, it's starting to get everything wet now." We'd go back out and adjust the lines for them, and then explain to them, "Hey, the weather changes, but there's only one setting for the pump." Now, what we can do is set everything up with swivel adapters to where you can reach up and you can stagger them in different directions. You can point them more outward at a 45, or you can point them more inward. Sometimes the wind is going to want to draw your mist out into the yard or away from the patio. I deal with that at my house. And if you can turn these nozzles inward, you can somewhat defeat that. And just a little bit of directional adjustment can make a huge difference.
And even if the wind is drawing it out, you still have a cooling effect. It like starts creating a wall against a mist wall against the outside air, and it may not work as nice as if there was no wind, but you're still getting a cooling effect.
Yeah. So yesterday I told you I was, tracking my system as I normally do. I leave a thermometer out there so I can see from a gauge inside what it's doing. When it was windy, I was only getting about 18 degrees difference because it was wanting to draw the mist out into my yard. Well, when the wind died down at my house, probably around, say, 4:30, somewhere in there, then it jumped up to a 26-degree difference. So it makes a huge difference. And as long as people understand that, it's not going to be perfect every single time. Mother Nature is going to win, no matter what game you're playing. So the best thing we can do is set it up for averages and make it adjustable to accommodate those changes.
Now, in addition to a nice cooling effect, Rex, you were talking about all the other applications of mist during the break.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot. We do tree fog. We do ground fog. We cool pavers. We cool turf. We can use it as an effect for evening lighting. So if somebody has a hotel has a fancy red, green, blue lighting system and they want to have some fog around it, we've done that. That's pretty cool. We've made it look like smoke. We had a restaurant that had a tower, like an old smoke tower, but obviously they're not doing smoke. So we crammed a bunch of nozzles on the top of this thing, and you could see it from the freeway. It was fantastic, yeah. So a lot of applications.
So what restaurant was that, just out of curiosity?
It was, it was over by the football stadium when they first built it. It was a Mexican restaurant they've torn down since.
It was a big margarita-looking can
They called it, the margarita factory is what
was
they
it
called
Margaritaville? Jimmy Buffett's Margarita?
No.
So it's not something I could go see.
No, unfortunately they tore it down. But that restaurant was around maybe 8 or 10 years. It's over by the Tanger Outlet Mall, which we also did. So we've done malls and by the way, anybody that's dealing with paper products, you need humidification. Pot growing companies for humidification, dust and odor control for recycling centers. We've done all those.
And dust control, you see the misters used a lot in certain construction applications because they've got regulations on having a dust control depending on what city and municipality you're in. And it doesn't always make sense to have a water truck coming through and spraying it down. So you do see temporary setups in construction a lot with misters.
That's correct. Yep, that's correct.
So, and a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of the month when we had our Farm Fresh Hour in dairy, he was talking about the misting system that they put in to keep their dairy cows comfortable. So you see it in agriculture as well.
That's right.
A lot of applications.
Finding horse barns, yep.
Finding that water source, making it through the Arizona summer.
Rosie on the house. Every Arizona homeowner's best friend.